an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering One Piece, episodes 187, 188, and 189. In these episodes, we get to go back in time 400 years and see Noland land on Shandora and the unlikely friendship that almost falls apart due to a terrible misunderstanding. Honestly, as much as Noland kind of sucks at times, I liked these episodes. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Florian for commissioning these episodes. What's up? Florian is also helping me with some art stuff that you guys might be seeing a little bit later on. So keep your eyes out if you're interested in some merch that I may be doing. And I say may because I have to pay up front for it, so it's still a question mark, but I would like to. When I say that Noland sucks a lot of the time, honestly, Noland is kind of sweet. I'm going to call him Noland from here on just because I know that he has another first name that we learn in this one, but I think we learned it before this, to be honest. But his name is so close to the name Nolan, and that is a cousin's name of mine, and that kid is adorable and very much a sweetie pie. And meeting him here, it really just cemented that he's a Noland for me. So I'm going to call him Noland, even though he has a first name. But he comes into this situation in that kind of way that can feel rather frustrating because he doesn't know this culture at all, and he sort of like has a lot to say to them about the way they're handling things because they are ignorant natives and they don't know about the advances of culture and technology. But also, why would they know, dude? And he has a very sort of like judgy attitude about it. That said, they are literally sacrificing young girls. So it's very hard for me to like be too mad at him for being like, what the fuck, guys? Gus says Mont Blanc is his surname, so Noland is good. Oh, I thought his last name was Noland. Okay, cool. Well, thank you, Gus. Demi, in response to awkwardness, sounds like you are a dog with that social jawing. I don't know. Do dogs do that? I don't know. I didn't know about that, Demi. And sorry, anybody who's listening, before I actually pressed record, I mentioned how I seem to yawn in response to like feelings of awkwardness, and I can't tell if that's really happening or if it's sort of like I don't know, but I have a weird tendency to yawn right before I start recording episodes, even though I'm not really tired, and I don't know where that comes from. So anyway, we start episode 187 where, with like the present, we're watching Eneru attack Skypiea, all of this lightning raining down, and really that's pretty much like the way that it caps off at the end of 189 as well, to sort of remind us where we are. They start things off, let us know this is what's currently happening. We go back in time and pretty much stay 400 years ago for the next 3 episodes until like the last 2 minutes of 189, where we then see our friends again. So they are there's this sort of sepia toned scene of Viper being told about the history between their leader, who they treated as kind of a god in the way that they talk about him, in their like giant statue of him. There was a distinct sense to me of like them worshiping this dude, but it just seems to really be that he is an ancestor that they respect, who seem to like establish a lot of the Shandoran people and their like customs and traditions. So they just hold him in high respect. But he isn't actually a god. So we're seeing this departure of the crew, and they are this whole thing is like kind of in media res in a way, because we're told that this is going to be about Noland and the way that he meets Kalgara. And we start off with Kalgara attacking a ship full of people, and he is extremely aggro. He's got a ton of red hair that is like piled all over his head in such a way that it almost looks like a feather headdress, like sticking out in all directions. And he licks his lips extremely dramatically when he attacks this ship and lights it on fire. So we get to just see how he normally treats people who wind up on Shandoran land. And then we cut to Noland's crew, and they are out in the ocean. Noland is being called Commodore. I didn't realize that he had like that much power, but it's not just captain. And they're talking about the fact that they are lost at sea. They don't have any food left. And he jumps overboard, and everybody is like, is he just abandoning us? And doesn't want to starve to death, so he's decided that he's going to just let himself drown instead. And somebody points out he has very neatly folded up his clothing and put his weapon here. So no, I'm pretty sure he's going to come back. And not only does he come back, but he brings a giant fish with him. And I don't even know if it's a whale, but he just climbs up the side. He's got this rope that he hands to some dude, tells them to pull it in. And when the guy yanks, it's this enormous creature. And he's just like, cut it up and make some dinner for us. And it was really interesting because he is humongous. So the illustrations that we've seen in that little book of Noland's like doofy face, they make him look very childlike and silly. But then you get to see that he is like this extremely tall, completely jacked dude. And it was extremely surprising to me. I was not ready for Noland to be this kind of like striking and badass. Even if he was deemed a liar, I would have thought that they would still have like kept that aspect of him, but they just, it seems, wanted to like, is diminutize a word? Diminish, I guess, is really the way, but diminish doesn't feel adequate. Diminish just makes it seem like you're trying to like make his reputation smaller. Diminutize is like making him literally smaller. And that's what I'm wanting to say, but I suppose diminish like kind of accomplishes that. It's not quite specific enough. It doesn't matter. I just was taken aback when this guy climbs over the edge, seeing him and seeing that they all address him as the Commodore. I was like, word? Oh, okay. And we see him in his study during a storm. And he is in the midst of reading things and also making an account of what's been going on while shit is going absolutely haywire out on deck. And reminder, he also has that weird little filbert hair, that like hazelnut on his head. And that is the like sort of figure on the front of his ship as well. So he hears this bell. And everybody thinks that he's, first of all, hearing thunder. Second of all, when they land on this island, they think that it's just these weird birds, or that he just imagined it. And this sound winds up being the sound, of course, of the golden bell, this giant golden bell of legend. And it's really wild because the show, and I don't know if this is different in the dub. Maybe what I'm hearing in the dub isn't the same. But they repeatedly talk about this beautiful tone. And the sound that I'm hearing when the bell rings is this extremely sinister, foreboding tone that sounds like something they would use in an A24 film preview. There is something about it that is really, really creepy. Not at all a sound that I would want to move toward. It is the kind of thing that I would be like, okay, we should really get out of here because that does not feel like anything good. Like, this is the kind of sound that if I were to know that there were human sacrifices happening, I would think this sound signaled a sacrifice about to be made, kind of thing. So it's really funny because throughout the episode, it's just meant to be like how this sound that's so lovely draws him to this particular area. And to me, it is just awful. And really, like, every time that I heard it in the show, I sort of like told myself, oh God, that's really awful. And then some time would pass and I would be like, I was probably being dramatic. And then I would hear it again and I was like, no, that's really awful. I was right to disparage this. So it's kind of thing though. It's really hard to, like, when you say something sounds beautiful, it's such a subjective thing. Everybody takes that to mean something different. How do you make a sound that is appealing to everybody? And I say that trying to be compassionate to the creators of this. However, I really would like to know how many people actually think this sounds beautiful, because I can't imagine that I'm the exception. This is just, like I said, it feels like it's from a horror movie. So I'm real curious to anybody listening, if you had a reaction to this at all that was positive. It's fine. It's not like this really matters. But I do find it sort of like compelling whenever something is described as being sort of a lure, irresistible in any way, and then seeing the way that's actually depicted and whether or not that feels like it really works for you, Demian says that nightmare bell sound is also in the Japanese version as far as I remember. Gus says, I like it. It definitely sounds unique, and I guess just having it be a normal bell sound might sound kind of silly. Yeah, but those aren't our only two choices. It doesn't have to be either this or just a normal bell sound. There's a lot in between. So it's just kind of weird to me that they took this sort of like, it's like a minor key with a metallic sort of almost like a buzzing to it that feels like an undercurrent of, like, I don't know, something that could be like almost insectoid. It's like really hard for me to describe, but I feel like there are a lot of places we could have gone with this that would have been more pleasant. Demian says, I always thought it sounded like it announces the arrival of a Bloodborne boss. Is Bloodborne a video game, I'm assuming? Demian, apologies for not knowing this reference. But I can see this being boss signal music, So anyway, that's just something that because when he first hears it, when he's in the ship, it was so unappealing to me that I didn't put together later when he says that he was like drawn by something, that was the sound that he meant, until they like play it again once he's there with his men and he's like, do you really think I mistook this like weird bird call for a bell? And they play it again and I was like, oh wait, that's supposed to be the thing that he's like looking for. Ugh. So they jump from him and his men who are approaching this island to a priest who is on his deathbed in the village. And they're asking him what they need to do to get this plague that has hit the people to back off. And he says that we need to sacrifice another girl. And he dies right after making this pronouncement. And we find out that over 100 people have died from this. And none of them know how to cope with it. Now, I want to mention here, the Shandorans have wings on this island. And I don't really know what to make of that. Because other than the Skypiea people, we have never seen anybody on the blue sea with wings ever, as far as I recall. And it's really weird that they're down here on land with wings and they get shot up to an area that has all winged people also. Isn't that strange? Like, is it supposed to be that all Skypiea's residents come from the same, like, ancestors as the Shandoran people? And they all got, like, grabbed by the knock-up stream at various points in history and sent up? I don't even know how that would really work, though, because, like, I don't know. But I had expressed some, like, interest in the fact that some of them had wings, and wondering about the Shandorans having them and whether or not that was a result of just, like, interbreeding over the years. And probably that the Shandorans, I assumed, did not have wings. And then when they get sent up into Skypiea, that there winds up being a sort of blood mixing that happens for a little while, maybe before or even in the midst of whatever the conflicts are. But seeing this now, it's like, is this it's just such a coincidence, and there's no real explanation for it. Like, Noland lands and doesn't really seem to ask about that aspect of anything himself. And I just thought it was like, if you met people with wings, wouldn't that be the first thing you ask about? And they can't fly. Like, well, they can't, can they? It's hard to know in this show because people can just jump and it's like illustrated and animated in such a way that it looks like they're practically flying. And, when we see Kalgara attack that first ship, it does kind of look like he's flying. But I can't tell if that's meant to be what he's doing or if it's just supposed to be that he, like, makes this huge leap or what. But that would be, like, the first thing that I asked about is, like, wait, y'all have wings? What? And it never comes up, and nobody seems to ask about it anywhere. Even the fact that the Shandorans meet blue cloud people or blue sea people, and they don't say, oh, you guys don't have wings. There's no real acknowledgement of that difference. So I don't really know because, like, with Noland, he's got that weird filbert thing on his head. And that's not normal. But it seems to be treated very much as, like, a familial trait. Because his ancestor, or not his ancestor, his descendant, who we meet later, has the same thing. But this is not just, like, within one family meant to be, like, a weird thing about their appearance, like with the Armstrongs in Full Metal Alchemist, they all have, like, that blonde hair with the curl in it. It's the entire village, so it just seems different to me. And I don't know, maybe we will wind up getting an explanation on this. It's not really, like, important, but it was just something that I had assumed they didn't develop wings until reaching Skypiea, and finding out that they already had them was really, really surprising to me. Gus says the wing shapes between the Skypiean Shandorans and Anel's priests are all slightly different. Sure, but they have them. So it's just weird. I really want to know what the deal is there. So we then cut to this young girl who is talking to her mother about the fact that she is honored to be sacrificed and that this is like a glorious day for her. And she doesn't understand why her mother is so upset. And, you know, just is basically like, you raised me right to understand how important this is and how, like, I am going to save our people, basically, you know? And it's really kind of fun because I prefer this aspect of it when you're going to be doing something really awful and that's sacrificing a young girl. If we're going to keep this light, we need that young girl to be at least willing initially to be the sacrifice. Otherwise, we are getting a little bit too dark. So I appreciated that there is somebody, you know, grieving for her. And as we find out later, she's actually Kalgara's daughter. But yeah, she's like 100% into this and thinks that it's going to work and that this will save the entire village and yada, yada, yada. So it turns out, we find out eventually that this disease, this plague is coming from the trees. And it makes a little bit more sense now watching this moment where there's a kid in the woods. His name is Seto, I think is how you say it. And he has that plague on his arm. It's all green. And he's like bashing at it with a rock, yelling for it to go away. And says, essentially, I wanted to grow up to be like you, to Kalgara. And, you know, I can't believe that this is going to be what I die from. And I honestly can't blame him because there is... Yeah. The bashing it with a rock too, which may really seem stupid. The kid's way of dealing with shit doesn't often make sense. I remember one time I got a really bad rash on my lips because I used a lip balm that I was allergic to. And so it resulted in this like breaking out on my lips. And guys, I literally went and got duct tape and taped it down onto my lips and yanked it off, hoping that it would just rip the layer of like rash off and leave like unblemished lips behind. It did not work. Just FYI. So, let he who has not used duct tape to get away from a rash cast the first stone. So anyway, we go to Noland. They're finally all hearing the bell. He is looking really stoked about the fact that they have clearly landed somewhere with something to offer. And we watch as this girl is paddled out to the sacrificial altar, which is the altar that our friend's ship wound up being like just dropped on. So now we get to see like how it was really being used. And she is put up there for the god to eat. And they like tie her down. And this is interesting because like she is up here willingly. She is out here saying this is what she wants. But it is very clear that when the time comes, she is not really as ready for it as she thought she was. So, what should show up to eat her but the Kashi god, which is the giant serpent. And this serpent is the ancestor of the one that swallowed Luffy. So we wind up seeing that it had like a little baby, and that little baby is treated like a pet and sort of like tended to until the island gets like lifted, you know? And so that explains this look of nostalgia that the serpent has when it finally lays eyes on the city after it's uncovered and they like wind up going down to the right level. And there was something really sweet about that. I don't know. I just like the fact that this snake is like, oh, I remember these guys. So apparently they live for hundreds of years, which I'm totally willing to accept because like there's a lot of sea life out there that can live for hundreds of years. So yeah, this serpent like rears up and is sort of inspecting her on the sacrificial altar, and everybody is praying for this god to take this sacrifice and then spare their family members because there are a variety of them that are ill, you know? And as the serpent opens its mouth, somebody just drops into the water next to it. And then we see Noland leap into the air in front of it and cut its head off very abruptly, which, as you can imagine, is quite shocking because everybody thinks that this creature is a god and he just killed their god. And this can go one of two ways. It can go, you killed our god and therefore you are evil, or you killed our god so now you're god. And it really does seem like it's going to go that first way. He cuts this girl free. She's shaking and crying, and I really kind of wondered if she was going to be like, why did you do this? I was supposed to sacrifice myself. But she seems genuinely very relieved, after all, that she doesn't have to do this. And everybody is just like, well, we have to sacrifice somebody. They're watching her rescue. Like, well, no, we cannot allow this. And Kalgara is... I don't even think he's watching the ceremony, but he overhears everybody kind of freaking out. And he is really angry at this girl for not just going ahead and taking her own life, because that is the sacrifice she is supposed to make and be proud to make. And it's funny because Kalgara is like, he comes up behind Noland and stabs him. And Noland doesn't die, of course. But the look on Kalgara's face is so manic. And he's really painted as a fucking psycho here. And the fact that we like have to do this abrupt turnaround and see him as a person, it was a little bit tough for me because he seems like he's painted as such a villain that to then try and back off, it was a little bit difficult for me. I won't lie. And it's fine. But yeah. So because like Noland puts himself between the girl and her knife and like knocks the knife out of her hands, and Noland gets stabbed so that he can be taken out of the way and she can be sacrificed anyway. And he says, you and all your men must pay with your lives. It's not just you. And Noland is like, is that going to make your gods happy because you're acting like your lives are valuable to them? And if they were, they would have contempt for this ceremony. And the thing about this is that the concept of this guy who doesn't know anything about these people's like traditions coming in and just being like, this is stupid and you're stupid for doing it, it just has such a bad precedent that it's really hard to watch this neutrally as an adult. You know, as a kid, this is totally would be my jam. Somebody stopping this like crazy religious ceremony that winds up in people's deaths. But just like knowing that historically this has gone really poorly, it's tough. And especially at one point, Kalgara literally says, you don't have the right to impose your beliefs on us. And that's just sort of like waved aside. But that's like genuinely true. Like he's right. And it's treated like he's being silly. And the argument that Noland makes at one point is like, you're just trampling over all of the progress that we've made. But he says that before he has explained that there is a cure for this disease. So he's acting like they're willfully ignoring science, like they're anti-vaxxers or something. But they haven't even been given this information to begin with, and he's acting like they should just know by virtue of being human beings who live on the planet, and that's not how it works. So it's a little bit annoying, but eventually we get to a point where he convinces them to give him time, that he can like find a way to fix this, and he goes into the woods and finds there's like one particular type of tree that he is looking for, a Kona tree. And evidently this is going to be what he can make the cure out of. And there's like an earthquake at this point. And everybody thinks that this is the curse of the god. This is Kashi's curse. And we see a bunch of his men that are in cages watching this like crack that appears. And they're all just like, hey, let us out of here. We're about to die. And this island is being split and the forest floor has sunk. And of course, Kalgara thinks that this is a result of the god's wrath and the fact that they didn't make the sacrifice that they were supposed to make. We know that this is the precursor to the island being like split into parts and some of it being flown upward. But he comes down and he finds Noland like trapped in this weird spot between two rocks. And he's like, oh, it seems like the gods have decided to handle you. And Noland's like, well, I'm still alive, so your gods suck, I guess. And I really do enjoy when he's standing over Noland, that Noland just says, could you get lost? I don't feel like looking at you. There is something about that. Just like, I'm about to die and I'd rather not spend my last moments looking at your fucking face. That's relatable, honestly. So that's how that episode ends. And then in the next episode, we have finally him convincing them, like, I have a way to cure this disease, and saving all of them, and the, like, slow integration of these men into island life and the development of their friendship and relationship. And it's like really sweet in this weird way that I still have trouble with Kalgara, but I'm willing to like deal with it. Oh, right. Gus is in the chat and says Noland casually decapitating a snake that Zoro couldn't even scratch. That did occur to me. I found it really weird how easily he was able to do that. And I'm not sure if that's supposed to be like an exaggeration of the myth, or if it's supposed to be that he was just that insanely badass. But I thought it was kind of like, this is just what the show does, though, right? Villains are completely unbeatable until they're not. And that's just something that they do when I have to accept it. Okay. So I'm running out of time here. I only have like 25 minutes left. So I really do need to speed some shit up. But there's another serpent that shows up, and of course Kalgara thinks that Noland is going to be sacrificed and taken by the gods yet again because of the fact that he is, killed the previous one and this is its child. And he's saying, we discovered a cure, and that is what leads Kalgara to like take down this serpent before it can kill him and be like, hey, I killed this thing, which I think is a god. So I hope that you realize that I did something that's like pretty much the antithesis of my entire faith for your ass, and you better not disappoint me. But he doesn't disappoint them. Everybody who has this disease winds up getting saved. This is when we find out the girl that was going to be sacrificed is Kalgara's daughter. And we have a moment of celebration of everybody in the village sobbing with relief, dancing in the streets, while Noland, who is quite injured, wrapped in bandages, smiles beatifically from his little pallet on the floor because he knows that he has done a good thing. And there is this moment of trust that Kalgara has where he shows them the city of gold. And all of his men immediately start to be like, holy shit, and run to take as much as they can. And Noland has to stop them and be like, guys, what are you doing? And Kalgara is like, hey, you saved our entire village. So you're welcome to take anything you want except the bell. Leave the bell. But all of the rest of the treasure that you want, that you can fit on your ship, go ahead. And Noland is like, are you sure? And Kalgara is like, it's literally the least that we can do. We have a lot of it. As you can see, we've built buildings out of it. So please go ahead. And yet, in the end, he winds up leaving it behind because he feels so guilty about how much the Shandorans have given them when they now hate him. And this is a very abrupt thing. So first we have a moment with this, like, it's the thing that Nico Robin was trying to read, and it turns out that even these Shandorans can't read it. It was, like, written way before their time. So, oh, sorry guys, Netflix just decided to give me pardon for this interruption. They are protecting it, but he's like, the way he talks is basically that they don't have a way to translate it. They don't know fully what it says. And the poneglyph, that's what it's called. I kept trying to remember. And that and the bell are like really the two major things that they just won't give up and that they are going to protect forever. And he says the spirits of our ancestors are greeted by this bell and can return to this land at any time without getting lost. But he doesn't tell Noland about the trees and the situation with the trees. So Noland is unaware of the significance of this forest and winds up doing something that they are very upset about, and that is cut the whole thing down. Now, we wind up finding out about the link between the trees that are cut down and the disease, and apparently it spreads from tree to tree as well. And I want to make sure that I have this right, guys. So the plague that they were catching was from the trees, and the trees were infecting one another. So the plague would eventually kill all the trees and kill all the people. Is that right? I just want to be sure that I understand exactly how this works. It's just a wild thing, too, that there's just like a disease that kills trees and people, because that seems unlikely. But, yeah, this, there's like an introduction of pumpkins to their land and plant samples like that they have from the ship, and they are showing them how to plant a bunch of stuff. And this is one of those things that is really frustrating again, because historically the people who landed in different areas of the world did not know anything about agriculture in those areas, and they were educated by the native peoples who very much already knew how to farm their own land. And it's really, really weird and very silly to me that Noland is allegedly the one who brought all of this like cultivation to this island, because like the idea that he just has a ton of plant samples on board, come on, no. But because they're all talking about how like, oh yeah, we're going to starve to death, we have no food left. But then he's out here and he's just got like a bunch of pumpkins and stuff. And it just kind of like, you know, one of those things that I just sort of rolled my eyes out. But anyway, it's just meant to be part of the whole like, they're friends now kind of montage. And then all of a sudden they turn a corner and everybody in the camp, the village, is really mad at them. And we don't get, as an audience, any indication of why. it's wild too, because we see this huge fire that was built as like part of the celebratory evening. And I guess nobody in the village wondered where all of the logs came from. Nobody like from the village went out into the woods and helped them bring the wood. All of this was just done by the sailors, and nobody had any questions about it. So this is all burning right in front of them, and they're celebrating, and they seem to have no problem with it. But then in the morning, they're realizing what the fuck happened, and they don't explain any of it. They just tell Noland, essentially, to get the fuck out, and Kalgara is like, I don't want to lay eyes on that guy, because if I see him, I'll kill him, and turns him away with no explanation. And again, as the audience, we don't know what happened either. So it's not until the next episode that we see his daughter in the woods, and she's talking to one of the sailors who's like a botanist, I think. Is that the guy? But she's explaining to him about the significance of the woods, because those trees are each supposed to hold the spirit of one of their ancestors who has like come back. And he's realizing, oh, okay. So, and she says the warriors took up their weapons to come at you, but because you had already saved all of their lives, they felt too guilty to then attack you over it. So they just decided to bide their time and wait for you to leave on your own. And she goes back into the village with this news that, again, as viewers, we don't watch the conversation happen, but she comes and tells her father, you can't like let them go like this. And she says, what if you knew a single important tree was tainted by poison, and that its poison would eventually spread into the forest and affect people and kill an island? What if you knew beforehand? What would you do? And it's kind of like the way that she says it is so... It's so indirect. I found it really weird, because she doesn't say, hey, Dad, it turns out those trees were diseased and they were causing everything. She just poses him this like hypothetical, what would you do with that single important tree? And he just gets it and then goes to like stop his friends from leaving. But it felt really weird. Like, why not just explain? Like, just say what it is that's going on. And it's just like the whole way that went felt really weird to me. It doesn't matter. Like, he figures it out. But as a viewer, for a minute, I was kind of like, wait, so are you telling me that Noland and his men rescued this entire village from a disease, and it's never mentioned once where the disease comes from? That it's coming from the trees? That never, ever comes up at all? That was the part that I found the most unbelievable out of all of this, is just like, if you're going to save a village from a disease, you probably want to advise them to avoid trees that look like they have this, and probably warn them, if you see any other symptoms of this, you want to cut those trees down and burn them. It's never mentioned. They don't have that conversation at all. So all of these like sailors are over here handling this and cutting them all down, and there's just no communication happening in any direction. Super weird. Just really weird. So anyway, he realizes that there was a good reason for what Noland did, and he starts running to the shore and being like, I have to stop him. And we see that the botanist is saying, like, he doesn't hate spirits or gods. It's just that he always knows what's most important. And everybody in the village is hearing this story and is realizing they did it for us. They cut all of the trees down to keep us safe. And it's such a shame because Noland, very understandably, is like, guys, we're leaving the fucking treasure here. And at one point, he's like, we're about to pack up and leave. And he's like, does everybody have everything? And one of the guys is like, not everything, as he's gazing at this pile of gold on the shoreline. But knowing that they left behind all of the gold, and yet by the time they sailed away, Kalgara had figured out that they really deserved the treasure after all for everything that they did. I felt a little bit like Nami in that moment. I was a little bit like, oh God, that blows. They should have just turned the fuck around. They should have turned around with their ship. So let's see. Okay. So Gus says, I think it's explained earlier, Noland is a botanist. He explores the Grand Line partially to discover plants. Okay, so that's why they had all of these samples. I guess that's more like, that explains better why they had them and why they know about the disease and everything. But yeah, I completely missed that was like his focus, was that it was plants. So thank you for that, Gus. Demian says, in my eyes, this was always a villain versus villain story. The big colonizer versus the death cult leader, resolving their conflict even though intercultural communication is hard. Let's see, Gus says, that's why Noland has the tree fever resistant crops. Oh, they're resistant. Okay, spreading pumpkins knows the antidote to tree fever, etc. Okay, cool. Thank you. So this scene ends with Kalgara on the shore, crying wildly as he watches his friend sail away. The kid, who had been really rude to them, when they come into the village, he's like, so when are you guys leaving? Answer me. Pet peeve, when people just yell answer me directly after asking a question. You don't get to demand answer me until you've given an adequate pause and they have failed to respond. Then you can yell answer me. But before that, you're just being weird. But this kid is the one that is up there ringing the bell. And they are doing this to try and like give him the signal that he is welcome to come back. And honestly, it was really moving to see each of them, like him on the ship and Kalgara in the water, just like both of them lamenting the way that they left things and realizing that they're actually friends. And yeah, it's just really cute. He's yelling, Noland! And we have like the flashback to all the good times that they had. And he just yells to him, oh my God, I forgot about how the snake features so often in these memories. Come back again! And he just falls down into the water. I'll be waiting for you here. And essentially, I'll keep ringing the bell. I know that we will see each other again. And I was just so sad knowing that that is not how it goes. So we see him return home, talk about this amazing place that he's going to bring the king. I really do kind of judge him a little bit for being like, yeah, I'm definitely going to bring my king to this place, because I feel like he has to know what a bad idea that is. But regardless, as we all know, Shandora gets broken. Part of it's carried up by the knock-up stream in this like inexplicable event. And he comes back with the king, and the island just ends in this spot that it hadn't before. So he is aware it's the right island, and this isn't where it should end. They used to be right here. What the fuck happened? And it's so sad because like his friend was so sure Kalgara was like, don't worry, I know we'll see him again. And there is just such a certainty in his voice. And he would have been right. You know, it was like, that was what his friend was planning to do. I'm not sure how Kalgara would have felt knowing that he was going to bring the king with him, though, because the king really seems like a piece of shit. And there is a big part of me that feels like Kalgara would not have been pleased at the arrival of this monarch who would likely want to, like, take over and also steal all of their gold, including the bell, most likely. But yeah, so we see that he is brought to trial, and he is given the opportunity to deny what he told the king and admit he made it up, that he's a big liar. But because he won't admit that he lied and that it's not a real place, they decide to behead him, which is sort of a weird thing, because if he did admit that he lied, I would think they'd still want to execute him, and he would still have gone down in history as a big liar either way. But whatever, it doesn't matter. They also have like a fake, they have some guy come forward who pretends to have been on their crew, and he says that, oh yeah, he lied. That never happened. It was totally made up. And all of his men are out there going, that guy wasn't on our crew. Who is that? So I did like the fact that it's not even one of his men that turns on him. It's a complete rando that they clearly just carted in to have an excuse to kill him. And as he is on the scaffolding about to be executed, we see that chunk of the island going sailing into the air, and everybody is like, it gets impaled on the beanstalk. It's so weird. It's really, really weird, you guys. It gets impaled. The bell goes flying separately into the air. The sound of it is bringing all of this joy to the Skypiea residents. And that is part of what makes them think that this is like a miraculous, holy place. And it's just the whole weird, like, convoluted way that this happens is so funny to me. And the dude whose name I'm forgetting, they're calling him God. He is saying, this is the birth of Holy Land. That is where I must live. And I don't remember if we find out his name. He's got a cigar, and the fact that they're calling him God, clearly, this just means a different thing than I think of it as. But we then go to the Shandoran Island, and everybody is still alive, but they passed out from the force of what happened. And when they wake up, breathing in this atmosphere is really hard for them. So they look up, and they're being fucking invaded by this alleged God. And it's just quite an abrupt turnaround for the Shandorans. And they are prepared to defend it to the death. And as they're running at each other, Kalgara says, I made a promise, Noland, that we would meet again someday. And as he's saying that, we have Noland thinking to himself, Kalgara, where are you? And he's thinking, what will Noland think when he sees that we're gone? Hold on a little longer. I'll let you know that we are here. And I have so much to tell you. Honestly, guys, there was something about I have so much to tell you that was the one that got to me. Because there is nothing like that particular feeling of just wanting to have a conversation with somebody and not being able to. We take for granted a lot these days the ability to be in touch with people all the time. And I think a lot about how hard it used to be. And I mean, in this universe, they don't have a lot. They have that weird snail phone service, which obviously the Shandorans do not have. But yeah, he says he believed the fire of Shandora would echo and let all know that we are here. but the bell never once rang. And everything was later told to our village by sailors from the blue sea. Noland, to whom we owe so much, had such pride for our city that he refused to deny Shandora's existence and died known as a liar. But it was already too late, for great warrior Kalgara had died honorably in battle here in the sky, never being able to convey his message. That is great warrior Kalgara's greatest regret. And this dude is telling the story, and part of me is like, is he Kalgara? Like, look, I know it's been hundreds of years, but shit works weirdly in this universe. And the fact that he's just up here in the sky, I mean, there's no reason why I can't believe that he just lived for hundreds of years. I don't know. Maybe, you know? And this kid says, could we still, like, if we rang the bell now, would he hear it? And he says, that's a good question. We are close to heaven. And that one got to me also. Just the idea of like, well, we know he's dead, so maybe he'd be able to hear us from up here. And I was like, oh. So then we cut back to the present. And Viper is watching Enaru just wiping everything out, while Enaru, with his giant smile, is talking about how all of you are in God's domain and you should return to where you belong. Let everything fall from the sky and into the sea. And we watch the island, Angel Island, just get completely obliterated. And the White Beret is just thinking to himself, man, if she hadn't come to us and warned us when she did, absolutely everybody would have been slaughtered. Like, I don't even know how we would have made it through. And just as he's wondering, where is she all right, he turns and we see her on the deck of the Going Merry, and the sky lights up and it blows up in such a way that I think it's meant to imply he just died. I don't think he's dead because nobody dies in this show, but it certainly feels like the moment where he's like, wait, is she okay? Is when a hit finally lands on him specifically. So the episode ends with us looking at Enaru blowing up all of these different things that are falling through the sky into the path of the people who are escaping Skypiea, like going through that exit area. And Enaru is like zapping downwards and exploding all of the ruins of Shandora. Like he's attacking specifically the area directly below the beanstalk. And we see that snake looking on in shock as things get destroyed. And there's like a sort of, I couldn't quite tell if the snake is meant to have been burned also. But I am really hopeful the snake will be the one to kill Enaru. I feel like that would be nice. I know that Viper wants to do it, and he has the right, and that would be fine. But personally, I would enjoy it if it were the snake. I just don't see how the snake survives what Enaru can do, though. That's the problem. That's the main thing. So this is when Enaru is saying to himself, the only thing that I want is that golden bell. And then he sort of like focuses and he realizes that he can still hear two voices. He can hear Luffy and Nami. And we just get the reminder that they're chasing after him. And then the episode ends. And that is it. So, yeah, so I liked this section. I like this backstory. And yeah, I have to agree, Demian, with it being like villain versus villain. Because both Noland and Kalgara really do suck in their like respective ways. But they managed to work it out. There's something about their like weird friendship that have you guys seen Vikings? there's a whole thing between the King of England and Ragnar Lothbrok that feels really similar. It's just like this sort of respect that two leaders who see very differently and have really different priorities and cultures and values, they still like really have a profound respect and admiration for each other that at times seems to transcend everything else. And it's delightful. That show was so well written right up until like season 4, and then they just decided to do wild stuff. But so yeah, I am very interested to see how Enaru gets stopped, because he has to be. And is Luffy just going to bash him with that gold ball? Seems to me he used this gold ball to like kill Luffy, or try. But is that gold ball just as much gold as the bell? Because it looks like it must be. So just a weird thing for him to be obsessed with this bell at this point, but it's fine. All right, well, I'm going to wrap up. Thank you very much again, Florian, for commissioning this episode. Thank you all for feeding me info and coming into the chat. Appreciate you all. And until next time, which is Friday, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.